As promised, we are going to report from the Baltic Brand Forum, which took place last week in the Riga Circus and was an amazing event for marketing and advertising professionals from all three Baltic states. My conversation with Jens Welin, the managing partner at NORD DDB and responsible for the new business in Stockholm, will be about the current state of marketing and advertising in Europe from the perspective of business and innovation. Otherwise, this show will be almost entirely dedicated to Estonia and its budget-making process. We'll be joined by Marek, the member of the Parliament's Financial Committee, as well as the Rector of Estonian Business School, Professor Meelis. Enjoy. We start with some news. Estonian government plans to cut budget spending by €1 billion during the next 4 years, according to the Prime Minister Kristen Michal. The fixed-term taxation of corporate profits will bring in €150 million to the state budget in 2026. This option was chosen because its impact on the growth of business and bringing FDI to Estonia was the least harmful option. ERR is quoting Michal. The head of auditor of Estonia, Janar Holm, has publicly claimed that the government lacks clear overview of leftover state funds, and by his calculation it may be up to €2 million for the years 2023 and 24. Latvian Eleving Group had an IPO starting this Monday. 24.5 million shares were issued, ranging from 1.6 to 1.85 euro for retail investors. This company aims to raise 30 million euro in new capital. Eleving Group is known as giving out car loans and consumer loans and operates in 16 countries. The IPO is the so-called dual listings category because it lists the shares simultaneously on Nasdaq Riga and Frankfurt Stock Exchange. About 70 business owners and managers from Latvia, joined by the Minister of Economics Viktors Valainis and the President of Latvia Edgars Rinkevičs, spent about a week in the United States closing deals and making connections. It's now reported that Mr. Valainis has met the President George W. Bush and Bob Gates in a gas tech summit in Houston, Texas. They were welcomed in Microsoft, Meta, as well as Stanford University. Latvian startups had a chance to showcase their companies in front of Valley investors, but the trip finished in Denver, Colorado, where several companies with Latvian roots have found their place. The so-called KPI for this visit is to bring back deals worth up to $1 billion. And I think this is the right time and right place to actually reveal what Median Report is and who are we? Because, of course, I know that the first episode was out last week, and some of you may ask the question, who is Kristaps and who is Tarmo? So, yes, first of all, a little bit about Median Report. As I said last week, this is the next chapter in a podcast that's called Median, and that's all only run in Latvian. But I decided to bring it to pan-Baltic level and actually talk about the common Baltic economic landscape. And here we are. Yes, that's right. So Tarmo, I have to be honest. I don't know much things about you as well, because we just met quite recently, and we met a couple of times online. We haven't met actually in real life. This is how it works.
Hi everyone. I'm pretty sure we have met in real life, some tech chill press room or some technology event press area, but no one has bothered to introduce us.
Yeah, that's right. That is right, because we all we both work on the same field, and as I understand, you are also an ex-journalist.
I mean, I always love to quote one Lithuanian guy I heard speaking at some international conference 5 to 10 years ago, when he was introduced that he's a former journalist. And the gentleman started to speak, saying that just like with alcoholics, there are no former journalists.
Exactly. Because you stick to your standards, because they give you some standards, and if you're really serious about the profession, it really resonates throughout your life. That's right.
Absolutely, and also you're kind of born this way. Yes, I mean, what you do and what companies you work with, you kind of pick up some, I don't know, ethical guidelines, how things are done, or the structure guidelines, how things are done. But in general, you're just born this way. For me, I remember it was like my 9th grade history teacher who told me that, Tarmo, you're going to study journalism, right? And I was mesmerized. I was like, what? Why? Never thought about this. But clearly she knew more than I did at the time.
Yeah, she saw through you.
Absolutely.
But what I want to say, that this would not really be a product of journalism, because if we would approach media and report from that perspective, we need to really invest more time and more effort, and then do these things like journalists do, cover all the perspectives and everything. And but this will be a commentary genre. This really will be something that we will speak sometimes from our hearts, and really give you maybe not really professional opinion, but we want to really put on table different opinions, and give you a perspective of how we think. So it's all about one of the internet bubble. This is how I call it.
I like the logic of perspectives. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and opinions, because of course we are really opinionated. Like each and every of us, we know how Estonia, how Lithuania and Latvia should develop, and so everyone has their own opinions. But tell a little bit about yourself. I know that you have worked for Reuters, right?
Yes, basically. I started my career as a journalist for Postimees back in Postimees is Estonia's largest daily. Back in 1996, mediums like video podcasting was probably not invented, or the podcasting was not invented.
Well, you were 12 years old, or what?
Yes, roughly. Thankfully, I never wrote an article on a typewriter, but let's say it was close. At the time when I started, people were still in newsrooms, or wherever the press conferences, people were still with typewriters. I am from the generation where my first article was sent to the newsroom already by email. I think there were still in 96 faxes, but I'm not 100% sure. So I'm portraying myself as a grey person here. 50 years old, so I know how the world should be run, right?
Exactly. Yeah. My beginnings are very, very similar. Though I started in 1994, but I really was 12 years old. I was 12 years old. I started some children programs on local TV, and together with my friends, we were brave enough to go to TV station and actually knock on the door and say that hey, we want to create something on TV. And that's how it started.
So cool.
Yeah. So, and since there, actually, I also been a correspondent in Tallinn. So I lived in Tallinn for 4 years in the very early 2000s, and
we could do this in Estonian then, right?
Yeah. I can understand Estonian, but it's quite hard for me to really put sentences and even words together. Yeah, it's like that. Yeah, but and you are, as I understand that these days you are more IT tech orientated in
Yes, I mean, since Postimees kind of spent there roughly 5 years as their Helsinki correspondent. So most of my career I've actually worked in Finland as a journalist, not in Estonia. From 2000, for about 10 years in the early 2000s, I was working for Reuters covering the rise and fall of Nokia story for the global audience. Had a lot of fun with it. Some major wins, some major losses as a journalist. You win some, you lose some on the story side. Then about 2012, came back to Estonia when the child was 5 years old. So to raise her as an Estonian, it was about time to come back and put her to Estonian school. And since then, I've been also in the startup world. I launched my first startup in 2013, which was a horrible failure. Or let's say it wasn't horrible failure because, like with some of the startup stories, we hadn't raised 40 million or whatever to burn quickly and, move on. It was a lovely attempt, but it failed quite quickly.
Which is actually good because you
Yes.
need to understand whether this is the right one or not.
You kind of have to learn on the go as you build things. And since then, I've been on and off with journalism. I was kind of in a world between the almost like entrepreneur or corporate comms or journalism. I was working for Reuters also for a while from Estonia, being their kind of Estonian stringer or correspondent on the covering Estonia at a time when we had I love to call it the the populist right-wing government, when we had the EKRE.
The very early stage of populism in Estonia.
Yes, when we had EKRE in the government and followed all their news conferences and all their radio shows when they were talking to their followers and so on, and trying to make sense whether some of it is actually worth reporting to the world or whether it's not worth reporting to the world. I mean, mostly deciding that it's not worth reporting because if people say something only with an aim to reach headlines, then it doesn't really make sense to be a reporter there, amplifying their message or making their message stronger and making it fly further.
Yeah. Now knowing that Estonian politicians are this show today is also very much dedicated to Estonia and the budgeting process, and so how do you see this process from the side? How do you look at that, and what conclusions you can make out of it?
I mean, from the average citizen,
yes,
kind of side looking at it, you're kind of worried that some taxes are rising. At the same time, looking at the state budget and knowing what some of the previous governments have been doing on spending side, kind of understand that the taxes have to be rising. Looking at the defense spending, where we are today and what's going on in the world, please, we need to put more money in the defense. That makes all the sense in the world, right?
Yeah, but on the other hand, Estonia was this Baltic tiger in the economy. Everyone looked up to Estonia, and you're the land of unicorns, and so you still are. But now, when we see that Lithuania has gained in the competition, the question is, what went wrong? Do you have an answer on that one?
I was just last week having a long discussion with one investor I know, Tim Vaino from Change Ventures, about exactly the same topic. He was also, saying that basically Lithuania had a mission to catch up Estonia, and they basically have caught up. Maybe not in the amount of unicorns, but amount of unicorns is something of a marketing message of the government really these days. out of 10 Estonian unicorns, many of them are actually counted by also Norwegians, the UK, Sweden, Israeli, or whoever. So, truly Estonian unicorns among those 10 are less than half, I would claim. But, with a company also incorporated in Estonia and so on. But that's kind of beside the point. I think with Tim, we both agreed that Estonia these days, the kind of tech and startup world is a bit missing the mission or the big target where to reach. We have those unicorns. We have the kind of, a lot of things are here. The thing I'm really positively looking at is that how many of those entrepreneurs who were building those unicorns are now really focused on a defense sector, building maybe the next unicorn in a defense sector, but also preparing the country and Europe for our lovely neighbor.
Mm-hmm. And thinking about this, we are sending Tarmo to Vilnius to the startup fair, where he will report about the Lithuanian and pan-Baltic unicorns. I hope.
Yes, that's in 2 weeks.
That's in 2 weeks, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was there last year, and the startup fair is a lovely event. A lot of interesting companies, and when you're not constantly in Lithuania, there's a lot of really, really new, interesting things there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so how do you see the way out? Because as we have heard, the 3-year recession in Estonia, now raising taxes, cutting budget, government spending and all that, it sounds to me like quite tough austerity measures. Do you think it's the right path?
In general, yes. The austerity measures, it's nothing compared to what we had 15 years ago, right? You guys in Latvia, even more, I think, in 15 years ago. I'm really looking forward. On Tuesday this week, Central Bank is coming out with new forecasts. And their previous forecast was expecting for the recession to end in the second half of the year. And with the Estonian economy being export-driven, how else can you have a 1 million person country in Europe? It has to be export-driven. And with many of the export markets actually already growing, so I think there is hope that at least the recession as such would end. The question is, of course, how much these export markets are growing, and some of those key markets are in big trouble in general anyway.
Yeah, that's right. I agree with this. And the same situation in Latvia. What we don't have, and that is troubling me, we don't have really a plan for the long-term economic development. We have very, very technical short-term instruments that have been put in place for the next year's budget process, but this won't in any way resolve problems that are really long-term problems, and for that I am very sad. To be really honest, I'm very sad, and I'm looking at Estonia and Lithuania also with a little bit of jealousy there, that this is happening. This is really happening here.
I think the short-term vision is a challenge for the world, which is run on X or whatever the short social messaging platforms. You can't really sell in the elections the 20-year plan for preparing the country for something. I think there are some good hopes in Estonia. I think our current finance minister, who's very blunt and very outspoken, is a pretty good choice for the job. He's probably too blunt for the general political, praise or something like that. But at the same time, from the finance ministry perspective, he knows the shit. So I think I'm quite optimistic with the current, finance of this country going ahead for the next couple of years.
Yeah, we must say that also Jürgen Ligi was the Minister of Finance couple of governments back, and I had this opportunity to interview him a couple of times, and as you say, he is really blunt, like very direct in some way. Yeah, that's good. I think
yeah, and he's one of the finance ministers who's actually, regularly commenting on Facebook. So I hope our, journalist friends in Estonia and elsewhere would be following his comments, because they are quite interesting.
Yeah, that is right. Okay, I think we have done a little introduction to our audience, who we are, and I hope you will be following us on YouTube, on Spotify, and all other podcasting platforms. And we'll be, I hope, next year on some TV and radio platforms, probably also around and across Baltic states. Baltic Brand Forum was a true celebration. In the middle of Riga, at the recently renowned circus building, marketing people were charmed by powerful stage performances and advertising case studies that embraced humor. By the way, humor was the center point of the forum, and every case was analyzed through the perspective of humor. We heard that story of the famous Iceland verse, mimicking infamous Meta founder Mark Zuckerberg's keynote presentations, as well as McDonald's case study in Stockholm, which turned their business upside down. And it was led by my next guest, the managing partner of NORD DDB, Jens Welin. This time, we did not talk about humor or even ads, we talked about the business. And here is our conversation. I recently read an article in Financial Times when the idea of the article was it gave an insight how creative agencies are feeling right now in Europe with all the recession, with clients and everything. And the picture was quite sad, and it was forecasted also quite sad for a couple of years to come. So how it is in reality? One is the media article and so, but how you are managing an agency? How is that feeling?
I think it's probably correct. Like in general, like I think the advertising agencies are not feeling too well. I also think like the marketing departments for many clients are not feeling too well either. I think there's been like a squeeze on resources and also on budgets. So both meaning people and sort of the funding to do activities, which means that everybody wants more for, more channels and different levels, strategic, tactical, operational, always on. So you have to kind of fill this kind of content monster in a way, but you have less to do with it. So everybody's trying to cut corners, and that results in a lot of burnout, but it also results in a lot of poor decisions. That you think that you need to do too many activities and you don't do them well enough. So instead of like prioritizing and selecting what really to focus on and do them really, really well, I think many find themselves scattered. And for us, at least one of the solutions has been to have really good discussions regarding what are the key priorities and make sure like you have a balanced calendar for your client, so that you do both brand building and sales activation the right way, and that you are really, really hard on yourself, not just to do everything you're being asked, but to challenge it as well.
Mm-hmm. I have heard from different agencies that it's not something about the economic cycles, because the downturn of the whole budgeting and squeezing these budgets are going for decades already, and that forces to change some business models as well. Are you also changing business models and thinking about like different approaches how to keep the agency fit in these years?
Well, I think that I don't totally agree with that picture, because I think like if you go back 25 years in time or 30 years in time, there were some really, really good like marketing people in like CMO roles. There was also like really good creative agency that had like a very, very strong competence A lot of like also call it facts on their hand, but they also had the right sort of craft and intuition on what was the right thing to do. If you go back like before, like maybe in the 90s, you know, in many markets across Europe, you will find that some of the craft was much stronger than it is today. Exactly. There's also marketeers who were much stronger in buying those kind of long-lasting campaigns. So what we have seen, and part of this fault is actually through some of the recessions. So the first recession coming as like the dot-com era in 2001, 2002, kind of like wiped out like a lot of like pretty good like both agencies and marketeers, because everybody jumped on the dot-com train and thought like, now it's digital, it's internet, we're going to revolutionize everything. And a bunch of younger kind of CMOs came in with that kind of mindset. And the older ones who had all this good knowledge, they were kind of wiped out and actually left the scene because they felt like this is going in the wrong direction. And the second one was in 2008, when it was kind of this real estate bubble and the Lehman Brothers bubble and everything, which meant that it was the second time a lot of like older, like senior people again kind of left the building. And I can see that because what happened at that time as well was the introduction of performance marketing. So digital and like data technology, marketing technology, meant that people felt like we can actually build algorithms to know how to sell things, which is not right, because you only get to a certain point in return on investment. Unless you do brand building for real, you're not getting enough sort of exponential improvements of that. So I think what we have seen is that many agencies and many markets, like in the Nordics where I'm from, we can see that, for example, both in Finland and Denmark, there is very little focus on brand building. There's a lot of focus on tactical advertising, while in Norway and Sweden, there still exists. So what I see across the world is that we have lost some of that old competence that actually exists. All the data is there, all the science is there, all the great researchers, they talk about how we should do things, but we don't stick to that. And that is a problem. And that's partly why it's also causing a lot of problems for advertising agencies and marketeers, because nobody really listens to them when they're telling the truth. Because there are people who say like, we do it our way or it's the highway. And I think that's a problem in the world.
Mm-hmm. And the business models, is this something that also adapts along with the trend?
Because it has meant that there is less resources given for like retainers. So from like 10 years back in time, many of the advertising agencies would maybe have 60 to 80% of their revenue from annual retainers, which meant that here is the team for the client is supposed to be working both on briefs but also proactively. But today it's maybe 10% are retainer business, which means that 90% comes from projects. And projects are not like approved unless there is like a brief and there is a solution to the task, which means that many advertisers, they are not getting those proactive great ideas that used to be coming historically. So the business model has changed and it's like to the negative. I wouldn't mind having more performance-based remuneration in the advertising agency, that we can get like part of the sort of increased improvements in results that we are driving, because we can see from our work we are driving a lot of like progress when it comes to both revenue, number of customers, increased penetration, and average sort of bills or checks, which means that we drive positive margin from our work. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't mind having more like payment from results. But when you talk to clients, they're also a bit like hesitant because they're like, but it doesn't mean that your work is bringing the positive side. It could be we're lowering the prices or opening new shops or our people. Mm-hmm. And that's totally fine. But at the end of the day, if we drive positive results for you and we have skin in the game, maybe it's a good thing. So to be honest, then I don't see that business models are changing that much, except that it's still a lot of like hours, and you get paid by the hour in projects or retainers, and less like new types of models.
Mm-hmm. Today we are in the Baltic Brand Forum, and we're talking about humor and humor gone missing. Is this something that humor is something that can do something also for sales, or we are talking it just because it's nice to talk about humor?
No, I strongly believe that humor is important for many brands to use to be able to be perceived as human, to grab the attention that you need today.
Especially today.
Economy. And I mean, I think today in this show we've been talking a lot about, and we showed a lot of TV commercials.
Yeah.
But to be really honest, like most of the action is happening on social media today, and we saw some good examples of that as well. And the thing about being a thumb stopper, like as a brand, you need to get people to stop when they're scrolling, like an Instagram or a TikTok. How do you play around? You have to use humor. You have to be more human, and you have to be surprising and grab that kind of attention in a relevant way. So I definitely think like humor is very important, and we can see from the work we are doing with brands such as McDonald's that being lighthearted, playful, have a glimpse in the eye. You don't have to get like a big laughter at the end of the thing, but it's working really well because you are perceived as something people can relate to and like, and liking drives preference at the end of the day, and it drives traffic. So yes, I think it's very important with humor.
And finally, I have talked with some brands, with some retail chains, banks as well, and they all have said humor, well, we're a bit afraid of now this canceling culture and cancel culture and all the which is on the rise and some other things that we can, with this humor we can maybe hurt someone or feelings, so what do you think about this trend that is happening in parallel?
But I think like if you're using humor to make fun of someone, then it's probably not the right thing to do as a brand. But humor is so much more.
Or competitor, for example.
Yeah, and it totally depends. If you're a market leader, you should never make fun of any of your competitor because you're the leader.
You're the leader.
But of course, if you're a challenger brand, you can actually you can take that role and make fun of a big market leader or somebody else because that's the role to play, and people will accept that. But they don't accept it for the leading brands. So when it comes to banks or retailers, I think banks they are working with a lot of trust. And humor can sometimes be hard because humor can also divide people if they like it or not. So bringing stronger emotions without maybe the big laughter is probably a good thing to do. I mean, emotions.
It's not necessarily humor.
It doesn't have to be humor. It can be still a bit a glimpse of the eye and be charming. But getting a big laughter is probably not working. We see some examples where, smaller banks or niche and maybe sell mortgage loans. They can use a lot of humor because it's like a more mass product. But if you're a bank and you have big institutional investors and so on, you have to get the brand trust as well. Retailer, however, is usually for the many people, and the many people still like humor. And if you become too rational as a retailer, you're probably losing out. So I would say like retailers can actually have a good opportunity space within humor and finding your kind of humor.
Yes, exactly. So we are welcome back to the forum. Thank you very much, Jens, for your time.
Thank you, Kristaps. Thank you.
And now let's turn our focus back to the Baltics and especially to Estonia, which now experience different macroeconomic challenges. Once the northern star of the Baltic states and praised unicorn paradise fights the 3-year recession with relatively high inflation. I had an exclusive chance to talk to a member of the parliament from party Estonia 200, Mr. Marek Rainaas. Not only he's the member of the parliament, he's also one of the 9 members of parliament's financial committee who will be among the first to see the budget for the next years prepared by the government of Estonia.
Now it's that time of the year again when the budget is constructed in the government and will be passed to Riigikogu very, very soon. How do you feel about the whole process and the communication around it and basically the process of creating budget in Estonia?
I think this year budget is somehow a bit different. The trouble is that we as a country, as a nation, understood that we have to invest into security not only 3%, but even more. And we are going to buy armor for 1.6 billion of euros during next 8 years. So we have to find somewhere money for that also. And of course, this is not a secret that the Estonian finance situation wasn't the best when we, as Eesti 200, Estonia 200, entered the parliament. Right now it's called Festival of Taxes, what's going on, but actually we have to admit that before that, 5 years it was a festival of different expenditures. The pensions rise, special pension rise, family supports, etc., etc. So we find our budget with a whole of about 1.5 billion. This is really big money. So this was actually we entered the security crisis when we have to actually reduce our expenditure, and we have to find actually new budgets for security. So this is actually quite a difficult situation. And if we are talking about the fact that the Estonian economy is not growing already 3 years, so we have, and this is like to find the point of balance between raising the taxes, not killing the economy, but turning the economy to rise again, and actually finding more money for security. So this is a very tough situation.
Yes. Last week I spoke with the economist of Lithuanian Swedbank, Narius Mačiulis, and he said that Estonia is committing this textbook how to do wrong things in economy, like textbook wise. And his idea was that during these times you're not going with austerity measures and tax rises, but you are going with the government expenditure. You're investing more into infrastructure and so to keep the level of basically not to commit hard landing and avoid it at all costs, because otherwise Estonia will be in the cycle, in the spiral, when you cannot really find a way up in the next few years as well. So you need to keep the light in the house, as he said. So do you think that in this budget you will see that hope that that there will be this light in the house for years?
This government that started in this summer, actually the main thing what we are doing is actually getting the economy on right track again. But again, as I said, we have to find more 1.6 billion more for the security, and this is must. This is something what we have to do. And from that point of view, all other things will follow.
Yeah, but it's very important how this 1.6 billion is spent. If this is majority spent in Estonia, that is something that is in right direction. But if you're buying from outside,
I understand the logic, but the trouble is that Estonia doesn't produce armor and all this stuff. So this 1.6 billion will be spent so that 2/3 of it we will buy armors, 1/3 will go to inner security. Yeah. We are talking about borders, digital security, etc. So, and this is something what we have to do. But what I want to say is that getting the economy back on track, we are investing in that field also. We just passed the law in Parliament where we will start the support of big investment. So The state will invest also. Right, and the other thing is that we must admit that our state expenditures have to fall. So right now we are looking on the budget cuts. We are talking about 10% cuts during next 3 years. Next year 5%, next year 3%, and then 2%. And this is also a very difficult arithmetics, I want to say, because this is not going to be just the cut of salaries and all this stuff, because our problems are more deeper. Our basic expenditures are much higher than our income.
So it means that the public sector must be cut in some
yes, and
way.
We have to admit that maybe we have to cut also some services that government is offering. So from that side, we are doing right now, it's called zero budgeting. This is already going on in 3 ministries, and that means that all the expenditures are looked over, all the services are looked over, and actually those services that are maybe not needed are cut off, and also those services that are duplicating, because there are pretty much of those that one minister is doing the same thing that the other one. And this will bring also pretty big cuts. So this is a tough mathematics, but we have to go through them. There was also an idea from the businessmen of Estonia. They wrote a letter that, okay, let's take some loan for the security expenditure. Sure. They wrote a letter, and I want to say that right now the Estonian government is listening very carefully what the businessmen are telling us. But again, we couldn't take any loans anymore because the budget hole was more than 3% last year. It's near 3% this year, and it will be tough times next year as well. So if we take the loan, buy the armor, we will go surely down to 3%, and we will have big troubles with Estonian or European Commission, and I'm pretty sure our bank loans and money will be much more expensive.
Exactly.
So we can't do it. So we are going in that way that we are reducing the budget, cutting the budget for 10% next 3 years. We are raising taxes. Sorry to say, but we have to do it. But we also very carefully make structural reforms in the whole how the state is actually offering the services, and the main idea there is what we call personal state. That means actually that all the supports, everything, all the state offered services will be on a needed basis. So if people needs it, he will get it. If a person doesn't need it, he has more income than the others, then he won't get it. So this will actually, and this will be implemented from 2028, and this will also give us some air to the budget.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the insight. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we are going to analyze and discuss what Mr. Rainaas just said with another prominent guest, the Rector of Estonian Business School, Mr. Meelis.
Well, I mean, the process actually this year is quite tough. I mean, because Estonian government wants to cut expenditure across the board about 10% in the next year's budget. And it's not only about the next year's budget, but another 10% will be cut in the 3 years after next year, basically meaning 26, 27, 28. And obviously it is economically tough because we don't know exactly how Estonian economy will do next year and year after. I mean, there are obviously official forecasts, but we have seen in the past that forecasts do not obviously tell us exactly what will happen, and that's quite natural. And even more difficult is a political process, and the political process is also quite messy, where in one hand, government coalition may make the announcement that certain areas will be excluded for those cuts, but then they start arguing publicly about what exactly will be excluded and what it means.
Yes, we know you already explained this moment with quite large government cuts and so on. But at the same time, we also know Erkki Keldo's plan with the investments, with the investment program. You see that those two things fit together, because from my perspective, these austerity measures are much larger.
Absolutely. I mean, one thing is cuts, right, that the government proposes, but at the same time, they also plan to increase expenditure by introducing new taxes. So VAT, value-added tax, will go up, and also there will be increase in personal income tax by 2%, and also plan to introduce corporate income tax 2%, which has not been the case in Estonia for several decades. So we so far have had no corporate income tax on reinvested profits. And if you actually look, for instance, the planned revenue from the corporate income tax, it's actually quite small. It's 150 million. And keep in mind that the Estonian budget this year on the expenditure side is close to 18 billion. So it's just quite a small part of this overall budget. And then at the same time, government is planning to spend same amount or even more in promoting investments and giving like additional support for those who make investment decisions in the Estonian economy. So I personally see it as a somewhat sort of contradictory, because why not to maybe give up something and that we don't necessarily need to do and avoid those tax increases.
Yeah, that's right. How do you see the public and the entrepreneurs are taking all this? Because from Latvia, it sounds that there are no lot of protests or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I mean, like Estonians have their own way of dealing with politics, and we tend to be relatively calm and modest. And let's just make a very quick comparison with really serious economic crisis in 2008 and 2009, where we saw like really significant cuts and very high level of unemployment. At one quarter it was about 20%, and very significant drops in GDP in 2 years for a row. And even then, when government came up with austerity measures, there were no like really serious street protests, and quite interestingly, the same political parties were elected back to the power. So my point is that even when we have been going through much more difficult times than current economic decline, then we haven't seen kind of very emotionally loaded reactions from the public. But obviously, there are questions, and And if you look at some of the measures of trust, for instance, we have seen trust declining in the public institutions, especially in the politicians, among the general public. And I think among the entrepreneurial community, we also see distrust. In the entrepreneurial community, actually, there is no consensus what would be the best measures. There was this letter by prominent business people who said that, well, of all the worst measures, corporate income tax would be the best. But I would say that just like a few days before that, several business organizations, such as Estonian Employers Association and also Estonian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, were arguing against corporate income tax and were proposing measures how to tax a balance sheet. So I think it a little bit comes down to corporate interest. Those who have a very excessive balance sheets and but don't foresee profits in a great extent in the coming years, maybe are for the profit tax. And those who think that they can earn quite a lot of profit, but maybe don't have such excessive balance sheets, or maybe for the balance sheet tax. But I think overall, it has turned into what has been called here in Estonia a tax festival, that instead of making very principled argument against some of the measures such as corporate income tax, we are here debating what type of measures to implement and how it would be best to tax businesses. And obviously there is no silver bullet. There is no solution that works for everybody, because businesses are different and hence they will be affected differently. And there is no solution that would please everyone. And the result is that we're getting this really mediocre improvement in revenues, hopefully. We don't know for sure, obviously, because initially the government thought that they can collect 200 million by imposing corporate income tax. Now they say that, well, it's more like 150 million. And of course, we don't, because all kind of games that can be played with corporate profits and that they can be transferred among different units and so on across borders. We don't know actually how much of that will be collected. And I think the transaction costs of going through that type of exercise are quite huge. And a lot of the debate has not focused on sort of reputational cost. And reputational cost is that Estonia is known as a country that has no corporate income tax on reinvested profits. And now, even if you introduce a small tax, which is 2%, you're fundamentally altering this policy. And it's more than just one tax. It's also about kind of international marketing tool of Estonia. But
it's crossing the Rubicon here in this case.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah. Let's look into the future a little bit. 2-3 years from now, how do you see what are the key scenarios how we can get back on track with the Estonian economy?
I mean, the hope is that the growth will be restored, right? And that obviously depends on what happens on one hand in the key export markets. I mean, and one of the reasons why Estonian economy was not doing so well in the last couple of years is that the Estonian manufacturing sector basically focused very much on a Swedish market, and they basically focused on investment goods that were inputs in Swedish real estate sector. And so there was a less demand for that in Sweden because of the somewhat more difficult economic circumstances, and that affected Estonian manufacturing business. So on one hand is that to a certain extent, hopefully some of those sectors can improve. Obviously, we don't know. Another important player is that to what extent the Estonian companies are sufficiently innovative and able to find new export markets in other areas to specialize. And overall, I think what has actually performed quite well in Estonia is service sector, especially the IT companies. And so So we have 10 unicorns and some very successful businesses in this area. However, the role of the service sector in overall economy is not large enough to offset the underperformance of some sectors in the manufacturing area. So that's the key question. And if you already have this uncertainty, right, because of a number of reasons that I highlighted, then I think the government policy really is about creating more certainty. But what we have been getting in the last years is too much uncertainty, because government, I think, has been a little bit reluctant to make some tough decisions, and decisions have been primarily about cutting a little bit there, but at the same time increasing taxes here and there, and that's kind of not sufficient decision making. I think in this situation has hurt us as well. So if government is able to create more certainty, then hope, and the economy also recovers, then the future will be somewhat brighter than it has been in the last couple of years. But if it doesn't happen, then we are still in this relatively bleak scenario of no growth or even decline.
Yes. One of the priorities for the next year budget, obviously, is defense spending and security. The same also in Latvia, and a lot of things have been kind of given to this cause and also priority. And how do you see? Is this, of course, we are speaking about the defense of the country and so, but is this adequate, or if we are talking about all the spendings and everything in context of austerity measures?
Yeah, I mean, defense is obviously very important, and in that sense, I think it's a positive decision that Estonian government has prioritized defense spending, and it is not subject to budget cuts of 10% that are planned for other areas. Nevertheless, there is some debate within the government which classifies under defense, because defense is not just under defense ministry, but you also have internal security issues under the Ministry of Interior, and you also have cybersecurity organizations that are now under Ministry of Justice and Digital Affairs, and there has been some tension in the government about spending plans of those organizations. We will see how they will be resolved. But overall, I think it's a very positive approach. And this year, Estonian defense spending will be increased to 3.4% of GDP. Just let's recall that just like some time ago, it was more than 2%. And there is even some debate in Estonia now that whether the defense spending should be increased to close to 5%. But it's probably not likely given the austerity measures and overall kind of situation where we are in. Nevertheless, it is likely to increase in the coming years in both absolute terms and also in relative terms as a percentage of GDP. And I think what really is needed here is that sometimes I think the communication is not very clear. If all the tax increases and all the expenditure cuts would be more clearly justified in the name of national defense, I think that would be also something that is more understandable for general public and also for Estonian entrepreneurs. Nevertheless, we do see that sometimes, defense is actually given as an excuse, but it's kind of difficult to see always like how this particular plan fits into, aims of having a stronger defense. And I think this is something that government needs to improve, this sort of communication, because I think in general here, public does understand the situation we are in, and they do understand the need to have a stronger national defense than ever before.
Exactly. Thank you, Mr. Kitting. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your participation in this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.
It won't be easy for sure for Estonia the next couple of years, as for Latvia. At this point, it seems that only Lithuania, if making right choices and decisions, can become the next Baltic tiger for at least a decade. Will that happen? We are going to follow. This has been the second episode of Media and Report. My name is Kristaps Petersons. Have a great week.